What we know now is that we have research that says that events are the number one marketing channel now for both ROI and building trust. So it's becoming an imperative for organizations to understand the value of events, resource them properly, both from a budgetary standpoint and a resource standpoint, and really making sure they're maximizing their dollars for their ROI.
Well, welcome to the Keynote Curators Podcast. I'm Seth Deckman, your Keynote Curator. And today we're talking about event strategy and the future of live experiences with our guest, Wendy Porter. Wendy, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Seth. Happy to be here.
And we are happy that you are here. To our audience, thank you also for joining us today. We're excited you're here. If you enjoy this conversation, please like, subscribe, share, repost, comment. It helps us bring you more incredible insights from pros like Wendy. So I wanted to start things off, Wendy, by kind of discussing the evolution of live events. I know we have a certain amount of time here and we could talk about that forever, basically, but you have 30 years of experience in corporate America and a track record of executing high-profile national and international events. You know it all. And whether you'd like to admit it or not, I know you believe the largest room in the house is room for improvement, and we might know a lot and we can always learn more. And you've seen different shifts over the past few decades.
Yeah.
But really, based on your experience, Wendy, what's been the biggest shift you've seen in the industry over the last few years?
Yeah, well, I think honestly, what is the same, right? I think there's been really big changes since 2020, since COVID, right? So when COVID hit, obviously everything closed down. And so we saw a really big shift at that point to virtual, right? So we saw all these tech companies coming in and all these cool virtual platforms. And really that really changed the way we do virtual events and then in effect, how we do hybrid events, right? So when we came back from COVID, we saw lots of increases in costs. We saw the integration of technology in a really different way because of what we learned during COVID. So I think things are fundamentally different now than they were in 2020, really.
And inside of all that, how are participants, attendees, guests going to respond, right?
Yeah, well, so one of the good things actually that's come over the last couple of years is that we now have research. I think the pandemic really forced people to really look hard at events like, do we really need to be doing these? And when we come back, are we going to go back to live? Are we going to really invest in these again? What should we be doing? It was kind of a pause for everybody to sort of reevaluate their event planning. And so a lot of research kind of came out during COVID and just after COVID when we started going back to live. And so, I've known this intuitively for decades that events were important. And I always felt like I was sort of fighting for my existence inside of corporate because events were sort of the low-hanging fruit and the first thing to get cut when people are cutting expenses. But what we know now is that we have research that says that events are the number one marketing channel now for both ROI and building trust. So we just know a lot more. We're smarter now, honestly, because of COVID. And so we're also seeing, budgets really shifting and putting more emphasis on events. We're seeing marketing budgets now where, sometimes a quarter of the marketing budget is focused on events. So it's becoming an imperative for organizations to understand the value of events, resource them properly, both from a budgetary standpoint and a resource standpoint, and really making sure they're maximizing their dollars for their ROI.
Now that data has come in, professionals like you, it is a badge of honor. 30 years, you've weathered the storm and earned your scars and, earned your street cred. But really, you've been beating the drum with or without the data, or seen how the data has evolved and proven the thesis or the point. And not that there's rancor or reticence like, oh, I've been telling you this, but it is a little bit, I don't know if you have this experience where it's kind of like, duh, obviously.
Yeah,
like,
I told you so.
Yeah, a little bit of I told you so, but I'm like, you needed that data, especially marketers, right? And I'm not talking event marketers. I'm talking in general, product, business to business, business to consumer. I mean, you have hundreds, if not thousands of people over a period of time. I mean, I think of like dead shows or Lollapalooza and look at the Sphere. It's kind of like a dead show on roids,
Mhm. Mhm.
And it's like, of course, they could command, apart from the technology and the spike in excitement and everything that comes along with it, and the city that you're in, and it's new, and when you two and everybody opens it up, but it's like, duh, obviously,
Yeah.
you have people literally banging shoulders and rubbing elbows, literally, and you
Yeah.
can have your product, your initiatives, your messages, your services right there everywhere. And for decades, you've been like, hey, hello.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, and honestly, it's all about it's about the numbers. The CFOs want to see the numbers.
Right.
They
And
they just do.
I remember, but the initial aspects of the hard turn into virtual, whether it's Zoom or all the other platforms, CFOs are like, see, we don't have to wine and dine them.
Yes and no,
Right.
right? There's a place for virtual. There is a place for virtual, but you
Totally.
have to do it right. It's,
Yeah.
if you my our mantra has been, if you can do it on Zoom, don't do it in the room, right? So if it is something you can do virtually, then do it virtually. But when you're in person, you need to make sure the experience is something that, you can only get when you're in person.
Right.
My experience when I was producing virtuals, it was really like to do it well, it was like producing a TV show, a live TV show,
Totally.
right?
Totally.
So I think back to, if you guys remember, when the election was happening and we had the virtual DNC and the virtual RNC,
Yes.
right? It was really interesting to see how they produced that, and they were going to all these live remotes, and they were all over the country, and it was well done. That was a good virtual event for
Yeah.
both of them,
And
honestly.
and
So
I mean, this podcast, and especially having industry heavyweight like you, we might explode the internet on downloads after we publish this episode. But even, you and I, if we were on camera pre-COVID and we were working through some of the technologies that existed then, we might not have been that attentive to the microphone, the lighting, the positioning, being thoughtful in our responses and stuff like that. So even that has seeped into everyday life, which we
yep,
can
for
credit
sure.
to not TV, but really the event industry and contributing in that manner. I just want to
Mhm.
share with our guests, having somebody like Wendy, who's such a veteran and has such great insights. If you love this kind of content, like us, love us. I don't know what the difference is online between, I mean, I always wonder, Wendy, you're on your phone and you have your finger, right? And it's like, what is it going to take for somebody to like it or love it? I mean, come
Right.
on, really? Let's not be stingy. So love us, like us, whatever works for you. I have some question prepared, but I want to build on one thing that you said, which is really interesting. If you can do it on Zoom, why do we need to be in a
Don't do it in the
room?
room. Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
great. Relate that to your view on keynotes, because
Mm.
keynotes can be done in a Zoom, right?
Yep.
Can be, I mean, literally and figuratively.
Yep.
But there is something about the delivery and the engagement, the connection, the activation, all that
Yep.
happens when you're in the room. So
Right.
thread that needle.
Yeah. Well, I think there's been a shift in the keynotes too, right? So just getting up on stage and being a talking head and standing there isn't going to cut it anymore. To do an effective keynote now, you really have to be engaging with the audience. We know that attention spans are shorter now. The pandemic sort of drove a lot of that. Our focus on social has driven a lot of that. So we know it's just the way it is. Our attention spans are shorter, right? And so you have to be sort of disrupting the brain every so often to get it back focused on what the point is of the
Right.
of the keynote. So I think the most effective keynotes are the ones that have a lot of audience engagement. I like to tell a story about a keynote that I had many, many years ago. This was long before COVID, where the presenter showed up. This is before you could dial in, right, to the systems and pull down files. So I had told our keynote that he needed to bring his computer with the session on it. Well, he comes flying into the booth. He's like, "Okay, so we're ready to go. You got my session." And I looked at him and I'm like, "You brought your computer, right?" And he's like, "No."
Mm,
So we did not have his session.
wow.
Okay, so here he is, supposed to go into this room of a couple hundred people, and he has no computer with him. Luckily, that was what the days of printing handouts. Okay, so we had handouts. So we got the handouts out to everybody in the audience, and he just took the handout and he stood in the audience, not on stage. He stood in the audience. He's like, "Okay, we're on page 3." And then he would, talk through what he wanted to talk about on page 3. And he was walking around the audience and oh, ma'am, we're on page 5 now, and helping them move forward. And
Right.
so it was ended up being super engaging. And he got done with it and he came over to me and he said, well, that was actually the best session I've ever done. And I'm going to do it that way all the time now.
Yeah.
So he did have his slides behind him going forward, but he always from that point forward integrated himself into the audience and walked around and kind of did Phil Donahue style talking to
Yeah.
people.
I don't know how this connects. I was a teacher for several years. And when we would read, it was not only you turn the book and point, but as they're following along, you would go to their desk or where they were and
See where they
read
were
along
at.
with them, or not just point, hey, pay attention, but actually read a portion. And it got a little more textured
Yep.
attention, if you will.
Yep. Exactly. Exactly. So I think the best keynotes now are ones that are different. They're not just your typical stand up there for a half an hour or an hour and deliver your stuff, right? It's got to be different. And, we're also seeing that the big names aren't necessarily what's drawing people to events. So you can pay a lot of money for a celebrity name, and that's not necessarily what's going to get people there.
Yeah.
It used to,
Yeah.
not now.
Yeah.
Now it's about the right content, right? The right kind of education, the right audience is there that people really want to network with. It has to be that full package for people to decide that they're going to invest in the time and the money to attend.
I would make the case that it's not hesitation, but there is a shift in the approach to big names. They're still getting booked, but
Yep.
even the preparation I'm seeing, whether the moderator is a lot more active and they're really, because if you bring in a big name, an Oscar winner or a Super Bowl MVP or something like that, I often get the question of like, well, what do they talk about? And I'm like, wait a minute. You're the one who threw the name out there. Why? What do you?
Yeah.
What's the connection you see? And let's work on it
Right.
together. Let's
Right.
collaborate here. But I think it's really, how are you going to leverage that investment? How are you going to leverage that resource? And I think that that's part of the shifting sands too. Let's move on a little bit here. I could talk about keynoters all day. I know you have a ton of experience with them. I want to talk a little bit about, we talked about coming out of the pandemic, the use of technology. How do you, I don't know if the word is future proof, but what are planners in your estimation needing to focus on to have their events be future ready?
So as I said sort of in my last answer, planning events now needs to be about the full package, right? So I have something at my company I call the Ruby Ribbon, which is the thread that runs through the entire experience. And the Ruby Ribbon starts with that very first touch point that you have with an attendee. So the save the date or the invitation to come to the event or the first promotion of the event. And then that thread needs to flow all the way through. That's important when people are planning. It shouldn't just be an instance when you're, oh, here's our event,
Right.
come,
And
it
Wendy,
has to be.
what are some characteristics of that thread?
So like I said, it's really thinking through the entire experience. So thinking about an attendee, take yourself out of the planner seat for a second and put yourself in the attendee's seat for a second. What do I care about? What do I want to know? So it starts with the messaging, at the very beginning. And what does that look like? What's the look and feel, to make me feel, that's one of the things I talk about is the deploying and leveraging all of the senses that people have, right? To create a memory and an experience, you need to engage all of the senses that we have. So is it visually appealing? Do the words resonate with somebody and create an emotional impact, right? Is there music and sound? And when you get on site, is there, some sort of smell and even a taste component that somewhere works into the experience? It's creating all of that experience from beginning to end. And I think for future proofing, it's really about really being strategic in how you're creating that experience so that you're attracting the right people from the very beginning. And then the experience that they have on site is creating that really solid memory and takeaway of what action do they need to take? What's your goal? What are you trying to do with the event? And then are you accomplishing that correctly? And then are they taking the action you wanted them to take with even having the event in the first place? So it's thinking that way, thinking really strategic, not just about logistics. I think a lot of planners, there's a lot of details, right? To planning an event, thousands and thousands of details. And if you get too stuck in the weeds on the details and don't think about the larger strategy, you're not really going to accomplish your goal. So there's that. It's really thinking about data or technology and data, making sure that you're deploying the right technologies to capture data, which is important. It comes into play now more than ever with how you're following up with people, how you're messaging to people, how you're personalizing to people, all of that comes into play. So future proofing around that, making sure you're on top of what's going on with technology and deploying it and integrating it appropriately. And then really thinking about sustainability on events. I think, we all have a role in the sustainability of our planet and the place that we live here called Earth. And,
Yeah.
are you being smart about how you're planning your event from a sustainability standpoint too?
Yeah. I
So,
mean, and again, to the beginning of our conversation, how events are a vehicle that touch literally the 360-degree aspect of life, whether it's sustainability, the footprint, to messaging, to having every touch point be aligned and harmonious with the brand and core values of what it is and the initiatives that want to be communicated and the experience that you're designing. And then all along the way, the service that people are getting. And it is easy to get stuck in the weeds, right? I've
mhm,
seen it. You have 19 hotels or ground transportation or food and beverage, and you have to pull your head out of the weeds sometimes and get the big picture, not at the cost of letting things slide, but you can't lose that big picture view. And I've seen that happen, but the details are important, and at the same time, the big picture is really
yeah.
important.
Well, and I like to say, the details are what make a good event great. If you focus on the details, you're going to have a great event. If you
Right.
don't, it's going to be okay.
Yeah. And I think the more that the details are handled, the noise and the swirl of the unknown and the uncertainty is reduced and minimized. And that
Yep.
allows you to peek out and get that view of the whole field, the whole
Yep.
venue, the whole, the whole panorama.
Right. Which requires both resources and budget.
Right, right. Which you're a meeting professional, multi-decade, award-winning, international. I have been in business for over 20 years, booking speakers literally on every single continent and, every industry, every budget range. And I'm always fascinated in the shifting sands, the use of technology, and have seen the development of that or the evolution of it over time, right? And there's
Mhm.
always a balance between technology for technology's sake, but also maintaining that human element. And now with artificial intelligence that's in
Mhm.
play, which can be a huge tool for optimizing hotels, which I just mentioned, or budgeting and the deployment. I love that word, the deployment of resources. But you can have all that data and all those tools, but you still need the human.
Right.
How have you been doing that in your work, balancing that and implementing new technologies, but still
Yeah.
keeping that human in there?
Right. Great question. I use AI every day, right? I love it for writing and
Wait a
for
minute. Is
just
this an
generating.
AI anonymous session all of a sudden?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Seth. I use AI every day. Sorry. Sorry.
I use it multiple times a
I
day. I
do
think
too.
it's revolutionary,
Yeah,
right?
it really
I mean,
is.
it's great for generating ideas. It's great for helping to write. Just it supports all those things, but you can't just run with AI and not have the human engagement, reviewing everything that comes back and making sure it's properly functioning. So I think AI is pretty cool. I saw a platform the other day, I think revolutionary for capturing information like what's happening on stage in real time. It will take synthesize, the whole conversation that you just saw on stage and come out with a certain idea themes, create a idea cloud that now virtually is graphically displayed of here's the 10, new concepts that came out of that conversation that we just had. And it's almost instantaneous, right? It can do translation instantaneously. They can support 80
Yeah,
languages. So you can download your app. And if you're Japanese and you're sitting in English session and you need the translation, you've got it right on your phone
yeah.
instantly, right? So there's just some really, I think, amazing things coming out of AI that is really going to enhance what we do at events. And I'm excited to see how that's deployed moving forward.
Yeah. It's limitless. I was also at an event recently where there was a beta version, and this is something that's been in existence, but now AI is taking to the next level where you either have the option to connect with people that are like-minded or have similar industries or similar needs, or the
Yep.
complete opposite. I'm in drilling and mining and I'm at this expo and I want to find vendors that are in the hospitality industry or
Right.
in
Right.
healthcare. And you're also put together in that context of whether it's super different or super similar, right?
Right.
And
Right.
to
It's
have
gonna help
that,
with the personalization.
yeah,
Yep.
I, I
Yep.
ju- I just love that use of it, because that's where obviously the human is directing it, but then AI is facilitating it and deploying it in a more optimal manner, which is really, really
Exactly.
cool.
So yeah, you can have the AI tool go out. You could put in your filters of what you want out of the event, right?
Yeah,
Like you said, I want to meet these types of people. I want to go to these types of sessions. I'm trying to find learning about XYZ, put in the filters, let it crawl through the agenda and the
exactly.
content and come back and give you a personalized path of
Right.
what to do
The
at the
problem
event.
is when I did it, it came back and it said that I just wanted to go find the closest tennis court and if someone in some park where I could ride a bike. So,
Yeah.
I had to kind of govern my own subconscious there,
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. Tell me, what are you working on right now that really excites you?
Well, honestly, the economy's kind of interesting right now, right? So,
That's a
um,
generous way of putting it.
yeah. So one of the things that I am proactively shifting towards is more of a fractional service that we're offering at my company. I'm seeing a lot of organizations that they get it. They understand that events have to happen, right? But they're pressured from a budgetary standpoint because events have gotten a lot more expensive. So they're cutting back on events and then they're hiring talent that is younger and therefore cheaper,
Yeah.
right? But that talent, they don't know what they don't know. And it's not their fault. They're young, they're learning. So what they need is still someone to drive the boat. They need a strategist and someone to help that younger person know what to think about and how to make good decisions and how to be strategic and get out of the weeds and all of that. So I think this fractional model has really sort of exploded over the last couple of years. And we've seen it more in the CMOs and the CFOs and that side of a business, but
Yes.
why not a fractional head of events?
Right.
So I stood up a fractional head of event service about a year ago where I'm not coming in to try to replace your team. I'm coming in to help your team and try to make them better and to mentor them. And so I'm putting some concerted effort behind that right now, trying to grow that part of our business and really get the word out that we're offering that. And
That's pretty
my
cool.
my goal is to help people make amazing events, and I
Yeah.
want to talk to as many people as I can to
Right.
help them do that.
And while you can do the whole thing, it's also another channel of service to be able to do that in
Exactly.
that way. And, whether this is something that appeals to you or not, or our audience, because this is why I think our viewers and our subscribers and our listeners come back, because these are great ideas. I know many meeting professionals are freelancers, and the answer might not be, oh, it's as easy as call it fractional, but it might be an opportunity for them to reframe or recontextualize how they language and how they brand
Yep.
their services. And that's why, our audience continue to come back, and please comment, share with us where you've had an experience like that in the comments. We're going to put it in the show notes. We're going to put your website, Wendy, so people can interact with us and share their wins and their losses and where they've learned and grown. I also wonder, how much does that touch you on personal note, where you can kind of come in as this ninja and
Yeah.
really dial in precisely in some areas where you have strengths or where you can make an impact. How
Right.
does that live for you?
Yeah. I mean, that's a really good point, right? You need to know what you're good at, and you need to know what you're not great at, right? And so I have a really broad depth of partners that I work with. So let's take AV for example. Yeah, I know enough about AV to be dangerous, but I am not an expert in AV.
Right.
So when I am figuring out an AV production for a show, I am partnering with my technical director to help me figure that out,
Right.
right? He knows the right questions to
Right.
ask from a equipment standpoint and all of that. So I know enough to bring in the right partners when I need those
Right.
partners. And I've got that depth and the right people in the right places to pull them in at a moment's notice.
Dangerous it's like my French.
Yeah,
I'm
right. Exactly.
dangereux a little bit. Continuing on this with event professionals and how they contribute to the clients, I know this from experience. Event professionals love experiences. I've
Hmm.
used the term experience junkie, right?
Hmm.
Hey, there's a trip where we can walk backwards up a hill and weave baskets, under what, like in most event professionals are like, I'm in, let's do it. Right.
Right. Right. Right. Right.
And at the same time, there is a core virtue, if you will, or a real core value of security. And I don't mean security like software security or login security. And I don't mean security like job security, but I think more in the sense of professional development, that they're grabbing the reins and securing their career and bringing security to their skill set. What would you say to those who want to take the next big leap or looking to continue to expand their capacities as an event professional?
So I think it is about getting on that path to becoming a strategic thinker, right? And the way you do that is with experience. It's also though with being curious and participating in an industry events, webinars, go to conferences, get, aligned with different people in the community to bounce ideas off of. All of those things, when you do that, pushes you into that strategic mindset. So I would really encourage planners, while I know they're so busy and they're stuck in the weeds on the logistics, but make sure you're being proactive to carve out time to participate in that education, participate with communities, continue to network. Because honestly, if you're in corporate, you are eventually going to get laid off. It's just the way it is. So it's always important to keep your network up, proactively network with people, because you never know when you're going to need to tap into that network. It's just a fact of life
Yeah.
that if you're a corporate marketer, eventually you're going to get laid off.
Yeah. I mean, you said it earlier, it is a reality shifting sands, right? Whether it's AI, the economy. And that's why the importance of having that mindset of expanding your capacities, whether it's understanding AI, becoming a better negotiator, strategic thinking. I often say, here's my 2 cents in general, and this is more universal and it can apply to anybody. And I'd love to get your thoughts on this, is that especially if you're more junior, you're younger, you're starting out, even though you might have an old soul and you want to get, pilots call it hours in the air. You want to get
Mhm.
some experience and you have your strengths. And I think it's important to know your strengths and play to your strengths, but it's also important to understand the areas, like you said, enough in AV to be dangerous, know enough to be dangerous. So if you see an area where a colleague or a direct report or somebody is struggling with, not because you're going to be an ass kisser, but if you can intervene and say, hey, look, I could be reading it wrong. This seems to be like a little bit of a stop point for you or a barrier. I'd like to
Right.
come in, in the context of learning about this or alleviating it from you a little bit. And if it's coming in as collaborative and if it's coming in as
Right.
somebody who's on the team, it just occurs to me, I have it on my team all the time. People take stuff off my desk, not because they're kissing your butt, but because they know that the motor can go a little bit more flowy and
Right.
optimal. And
Right.
what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I totally agree. So I have a team. The team at my company, honestly, it's kind of funny. We all worked together in the past. They all reported to me at some point in my corporate life.
It's kind of
So
like you got the band back together.
yeah, we got the band act together. We absolutely did. And, we know each other really well. They know how I operate, my skills and my expectations, right? And I know their skills. And we all have something that's a little bit different.
Mhm.
And it's kind of awesome
Yeah.
because, when I need a technical person, there's one on my team that I will, hand it off to her in a heartbeat. And she is amazing with spreadsheets and pivot tables and, you name it, she can figure it out. She's great with the behind the scenes stuff. If I'm trying to figure out something on my platform as a small business owner, she takes the reins of that and runs with it. I've got other people that are really great at the social media side. And so we integrate them when we need to. And on the graphic design side, I mean, we have this really great sort of dance that we do. And it's sort of seamless handoffs. We all kind of know, okay, if it's a sourcing project, it goes to this person. If it's a logistics thing, it goes to that person, So I try to come in with my clients more as a team approach, because not every person is good at all of it. They're
That's
just
right.
not,
That's
right? And
right.
so to think you can just hire an event planner and they're going to be able to do it all, I think is not really the way the world is. I think it's better to have a team approach where you can have those handoffs and get the right experts doing your stuff
Yeah.
when it's time to do that work.
That's
So
right.
that's how I approach it.
Yeah. And you said it's not the way the world works. It's just
Yeah.
not. I mean, you
Yeah.
look at sports, you look at education, you look at healthcare, manufacturing, it's just not, and I think that the sum of each individual is greater. And it sounds like that's how your team is operating, and the band getting back together is
Yeah.
what they kind
Yeah.
of
It's like a surgical team. If you had you wouldn't tell your surgeon, well, I need one person in the room and they're going to do it all.
right.
No,
No.
you got your surgeon and you've got all of his assistants doing the parts that they do,
Yeah.
right? To make the whole thing come together.
That's
So
great analogy. We've come to the end of the line here, Wendy. I love this conversation. It flew by for me. I know you love what you do, and I know you make a difference. So I just want to thank you for those who have yet to come into your world and into your sphere that you're going to impact in a positive way, whether it's a vendor, a client, an attendee at one of the events, whether it be your fractional impact or you holding the space of the whole event. Just thank you for those lives that you've impacted, the difference you've made, and for all the times that you haven't been thanked for the work that gets done late at night or in the dark corners that nobody sees. Thank you as well. It's really appreciated.
thank you so much. I appreciate that.
You're very welcome. And to our audience also, our subscribers, our viewers, first timers, old timers, thank you. Welcome for the first timers. Welcome back to the old timers. Share us, subscribe. We're going to continue to bring you great content, great guests like Wendy. And we appreciate you coming back for us because you're smarter for it. See you next time.